everyone. This is Timothy Mark with Alexandria.
Hey, everybody out there. How you doing all?
And we are World Paranormal Research Society. Website's World Paranormal Research Society.org. YouTube channel is World Paranormal Research Society. So, again, we have this podcast on many different media platforms. Spreaker.com, Tumblr, YouTube, and iTunes. So in today's podcast, we're going to deal with Grimoires. So before we deal with Grimoires, we're going to talk about what happened last night in our haunted mobile command travel trailer.
Okay, I like that, how that kind of rolls off the tongue. Mobile command haunted travel trailer. That's awesome.
And that's what it is. But you know, we have a spirit in here that was messing with Alexandria last night. So why don't you tell a little bit about it?
He's been kind of kicking around since I think he really made himself more known to me starting in December 2017. And it's a male entity. I'm not going to name the name. I know what his name is, but I'm not going to name the name. But he's been becoming more and more powerful. Last night, for example, he was extremely powerful, wanting to get his message through. And as some of you may or may not know, I was born with the ability to see, speak with, and communicate on various levels with people that have passed over to the other side. So this particular male entity is building up his strength. Actually, I was woken up. What was the time that I woke you up?
11:47 p.m.
And I noticed that I had the phone beside us. We were going to use it as an alarm clock for this morning. Short story, cut the story short. The whole ceiling in the bedroom was lit up like a projector, and the blue light on my phone was flashing. I don't really know how long the ceiling had been lit up, but it actually woke me up from a dead sleep, and it was just like somebody running a movie projector, and I just woke up and I just couldn't believe what was going on. Hence I woke Timothy up at that particular time to say, do you see what's going on here?
And the spirit was definitely playing with the phone, and but I don't, we're used to spirits. We've been doing this so long that, every now and then we'll get one in here with us. And we haven't really done a cleansing in here lately, and we need to do one. But the thing is, when I'm asleep, I do not want to do a paranormal investigation. So I just told her to go back to sleep and don't worry about it.
I have to really, I'm going to have to do a ceremony, a magical space, today at some point prior to packing it in for the night, because he is becoming more persistent on what he wants me to know. And for one example too, I actually woke up with the taste of blood in my mouth and actually feeling extremely nauseated. So he was trying to use the energy from an electronic device, which is the phone, and tap into my energy, hence waking up and feeling nauseated and the taste of blood in my mouth. So very horrific. He has a very, the picture of him is very graphic, very gory. So we'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, and what I've been doing lately is I've been watching, this is off that topic, but I've been watching cat videos on YouTube. Them damn things are funny as hell. Cats actually attacking dogs. We've seen one where there's a cat actually going after an alligator.
Right, and then we actually have a cat that is sort of underneath our trailer more times than none as of late. So you're playing with the cat outside sometimes too.
Yeah, I'm beginning to really like cats, but especially on those videos. Those videos are funnier than I thought they would be. So if you ever get a chance, watch it. But
I don't think your allergies are finding it fun.
No, but what I like to do today, we're going to talk about grimoires, and so we'll say that your teacher Alexandria today has got a good lesson planned for you for grimoires.
Grimoires are something that I'm also very, very passionate about. I am a spellcaster. I am a spiritual person, a magical person that actually deals in spirit, and I always have. I've been born with that ability. And grimoire, even the way the name kind of rolls off my tongue, it just kind of sets you into almost like a fantasy land or a fantasy world. It's a very ultra fancy, very erotic terminology, and to really dissect it and kind of strip it down to basics, so people that are not familiar with the term can recognize a grimoire is really, it's considered either a book or a textbook of magic. How simple is that? I mean, it doesn't get much more simple than that, but believe you me, a grimoire is anything but simple. And quite typically it can include instructions on how to create magical objects like talismans and amulets. So if you're wanting to create these specific objects...
A grimoire is something like a diary for madmen?
Well, I mean, I'm so glad that you touched base into that, because near the end of my specific presentation on grimoires, I'm going to touch on exactly that. But I'm not going to spoil it to the listeners, because you hit on something very, very weird and strange that a lot of you may not know.
And I would like to say that growing up in the 80s, I know I say this almost on every podcast, but Ozzy Osbourne had a CD called, or a tape back then, called cassette, called Diary of a Madman. And now, after learning about the grimoires, I'm kind of wondering if he was speaking of a grimoire.
That statement is going to be more true than you realize, and I'll get to that a wee bit later. And again, I just said that a grimoire is a book, or includes instructions to create magical objects, again, like talismans and amulets. And actually it kind of tells you how to perform magical spells, charms, divinations, and also, can you believe this, how to summon and invoke supernatural entities such as angels, spirits, and demons. And really, many cultures through time have used other sacred texts that are not really considered grimoires, but really you could, such as the Bible. And we're going to go more into references to the Bible later on. But books such as the Bible really truly have been believed to have supernatural properties. So you know what? They really could be a grimoire of sorts.
Well, and when she says that, she's referring to the completed Bible. The summary, the summary of the Bible, the King James Version, the very just a little bit of a taste of the Bible, if you will. It's not the completed Bible, but the King James Version could have it does have things of that nature in there. But when you get into other books like the Testaments of Solomon, that's not in the King James Version, or the Book of Enoch, those things would be more specific to what you're referring to.
See, you have more knowledge than you've even realized, and many people may come to that same conclusion as I go deeper into this presentation on grimoires. And the term that we're using now, grimoire, is originally started in, or is considered originally European, and many Europeans throughout history, particularly ceremonial magicians and very cunning folk, made use of grimoires. There's a historian out there, Owen Davis, who actually noted that similar books can be found all across the world, ranging from Jamaica to Sumatra. So that's where all these various grimoires can be found. And it is said that the earliest known written magical incantations come from ancient Mesopotamia, where they have been inscribed on cuneiform. And I know in a lot of our previous podcasts, we have made reference to cuneiform writings. And actually, these cuneiform clay were actually the archaeologists excavated from the city of Uruk, U-R-U-K, and they date to somewhere between the 5th and the 4th centuries BC. Absolutely blows my mind, folks. And we always touch on, again, my favorite, the ancient Egyptians also employed magical incantations, which can be found on many amulets and many other items that they buried with the pharaohs. And there's actually magical incantations on tomb walls, other different writings on papyrus and what have you. And it is said the Egyptian magical system, and it's called Heka, Heka, I know that's a hard word, Heka, was actually greatly altered and really enhanced after the Macedonians. Macedonians, folks, we know that led by Alexander the Great, who invaded Egypt in 332 BC. And really under the next 3 centuries after that invasion of Alexander the Great, Hellenistic Egypt, the Coptic writing system evolved, and thus the Library of Alexandria opened. I have always been fascinated with the city of Alexandria, and everybody knows the legend of the Library of Alexandria. We're going to kind of touch base into prior to this library being destroyed. It was said to hold the greatest knowledge or written works of knowledge the world had ever known up until that point. So it was a very important library that housed magical texts, different kinds of writing, philosophy, scientific, medical, anything that was of key that needed to be preserved was really housed in the Library of Alexandria. And this particular library really likely had a huge influence upon the books of magic, where the trend on them, the known incantations, really at that particular point in time in history was really switching from incantations that were just from simple health and protection. They begin to swing and build up a trend to more specific things in magic, to do with financial success and to do with sexual fulfillment. So just kind of picture this, if you will. Basically, incantations prior to that were just health and protection, and then there was an upward swing into financial success and again, sexual fulfillment. And around this time, my favorite legendary figure or magician, sorcerer, many names began to emerge, and that was Hermes. And he was really developed as a confrontation of the Egyptian god Thoth and the Greek Hermes. And his legend is really associated with writing and magic. Therefore, he is said to authored many books on magic and going into Hermetics and the Hermetic Code. And also, ancient Greeks and Romans really believed that books on magic were invented by the Persians. So that was the train of thought that the ancient Greeks and the Romans had, that every magical book was invented by the Persians. And the 1st century AD, the writer Pliny the Elder stated that magic had been first discovered by the ancient philosopher Zoroaster around the year 647 BC, but it was only really written down around the 5th century BC by another magician. So we're really going back into time in regards to magic and ancient philosophers. So there had various trains of thought in regards to where books on magic were invented. Everybody kind of had their own opinion on where magic came from. And ancient Jewish people were often viewed as being very knowledgeable in magic. And I don't know if Timothy has anything to add on people of Jewish people being knowledgeable in magic, but that's a known fact in the time that they held, a lots of knowledge.
Let's talk about that. There's this in Judaism. You have the Jewish mystics. The Jewish mystics practiced the magical side of God's teachings, of the teachings that God had handed down to us. there's a lot of magic that is practiced in Judaism. But you have what's called the Jewish mystics, and then you have Orthodox Jews. Orthodox Jews are way different. However, they do believe in. They believe in there's ways of keeping evil spirits out of your house and evil and negativity out of your house. And the way that they do this is by the way that they cut their hair, by the way what they wear underneath their undergarments. They have so many knots in their clothes and things of that nature. And they put the 10 Commandments at the doorposts of their homes. And so that would go into Orthodox. But if you want to get more radical, you can go into the Jewish mystics, which actually practice magical magic. I mean, ceremonial magic and rituals and stuff like that. But that's not really accepted among the Orthodox Jews. It's not really talked down about, but it's not really accepted. Now today you have Reform Judaism. And in Reform Judaism, it's really, really watered down. I mean, you know, it's molded to fit today's society. It's Judaism molded to fit today's society. And you don't have a lot of that in Reform Judaism. Matter of fact, Reform Judaism would look down upon the Jewish mystics. And now, when you go into Christianity, I mean, if you want to talk about Grimoires and Diary of Madmen, I mean, look at the Gnostics.
I'm going to even touch on the Gnostics in my next section. I'm glad you brought that. You're bringing out key factors that are very important when we're having a discussion on Grimoires. And I have one question for you before you kind of go into what you're saying. Is it true that this is what the ancient Jewish people believe, according to legend, that they had learned their magic from Moses? What's your opinion on that? That's what they say.
Yes. It is true. And not just from Moses. Okay, when you go into the Hebrews that were led out of Egypt, those Hebrews that were slaves in Egypt, they didn't just learn the magic from Moses. You got to realize that they've learned a lot of magic from the Egyptians.
Well, that's what it says here, that some trains of thought saying that Moses had learned the majority of his magic from Egypt while his stay in Egypt. Of course, God, and then of course he picked up some skill from the Egyptian priests, etc., magicians.
Well, we got to understand that now. Let's look at this. When Moses parted the Red Sea, that was not magic. That was God helping him. So we have to understand that Moses and the Hebrews, while they were in Egypt, they did practice magic in the Egyptian form, but Moses was given the power of God, and believe it or not, Aaron, the high priest, which is Moses' high priest, used the staff, and they did things through the power of God, which is different than doing things of magic. So we need to understand that there is magic that can do things, and then there is the power of God, which Moses had at the point of the Exodus. But when those people fled from Egypt, they definitely took the knowledge they had on magic with them, and that was evident when Moses went up to get the 10 Commandments, and when Moses came down, they were already building a false idol, and were already beginning to practice things, and Moses got angry about that. But I'm glad that you're going to talk about the Gnostics, because with the Gnostics, when you have original Christianity, which is Christianity that was formed. Christianity, a Christian is a follower of Christ. So as a Christian, you would follow the teachings of Christ. Okay, so now that we understand that, there was Christians at the time that Jesus was alive, and there was Christians after Jesus' death. But in that first 100 years after Jesus' death is when you had the Gnostics really appearing, and they were doing things that was not accepted by what would later become the popular Christianity and not really the true Christianity. And so that's why Christianity now will look at anything magical as being satanic when that's a lie. That is definitely a lie. And there's a lot of bad stuff said about the Gnostics, but they were definitely a very intelligent group of people who had power and access to things that we can only imagine.
Yeah, but now that you've brought that point to the forefront, it's very important that, historically there is really definite evidence of grimoires being used by certain Gnostic sects of early Christianity. And
Yeah.
in the book of Enoch, there is information on astrology and conversing with the angels. So, the book of Enoch brings that kind of into the forefront as well. And who can forget King Solomon? King Solomon was associated with magic and sorcery.
Yes. And that's what I'm saying. King Solomon was associated with magic and sorcery. And the thing about that is, Constantine and the powers that was at the time of the reconstruction and the elimination of certain books of the Bible did not want you to know that. They don't want you to have access to these powers. They don't want you to have access to do certain things. So they remove that from your Bible. So when you look in your King James Version Bible, you do not have the Testament of Solomon in there. Now, if you truly seeking God and you truly are a Christian, or you truly Jewish, or whatever you may truly be, that you be seeking the God of Abraham, the God of Moses, the God of Noah, if you're seeking that God, then the Bible for you would be the Ethiopian Bible. That Bible contains every book that Constantine and the priests molested. And so it contains every book that was cut out by Constantine and those priests. And so, and that's where you get into the sorcery and you get into the magic of Solomon, which is in the Testament of Solomon. So, yeah.
Yeah, touching more on that, I mean, his association with magic and sorcery, and the first century Romano, they call it a Romano-Jewish historian, and his name is Josephus, mentions a book under the name of Solomon that contained incantations for summoning demons. And also, hopefully I can pronounce this name.
Hold on, let me touch on that. Because we do know that Solomon, and when you read the Testaments of Solomon, he did summon demons, and he also summoned angels.
That's right. So, of course, wouldn't it only be natural to assume that King Solomon would have his incantations written in some sort of grimoire? So, I mean, hello, common sense has got to come into play there. And the Pigographic Testament of Solomon is one of the oldest magical texts. And it's actually was translated to Greek. It's a Greek manuscript written in Babylon over 1,000 years after Solomon's death. So very, very important magical book in regards to King Solomon. And when Christianity really became the dominant faith of the Roman Empire, the early church really frowned upon the books on magic, and they automatically assumed it with paganism and burnt the books of magic. So what a better way to control knowledge, control the people, by burning all these sacred books of magic which instilled knowledge from thousands and thousands of years. That's what you call controlling the people, by taking the knowledge away from the people.
And if you reflect back to the 80s, in the 80s you have these radical preachers who were not radical at all, who were trying to brainwash their congregations, and they were also partaking in burnings of things. So yeah, that seems to be the Christian way. When they don't want you to know something, they talk you into burning it.
Either they burn books or they burn people at the stake. That's just their method of annihilating knowledge, annihilating people. And it's quite interesting too, and I'm sure Timothy may jump in on this point too. The New Testament records St. Paul called for the burning of magic and pagan books in the city of Euphrates. Is that correct? St. Paul.
The New Testament.
In the New Testament, he calls for the burning of magic and
Paul.
Pagan books. Is that fair to assume that's an accurate statement?
Paul's somebody that I really don't like, or I can't appreciate. Paul is a guy. Okay, let's look at creation. When creation happened, God gave woman to man in the second creation. Okay, and he said this. He said, "Go forth and multiply," and he established what the union in the marriage would be. So did Jesus Christ. Now, Paul, something was wrong with Paul, because Paul would stand up in a crowd of married people and he'd tell them not to have sexual relations with each other. there's something that I don't sit right with me about Paul, and I don't really want to comment too much on him. But yeah, he was burning stuff that would be considered pagan. But let's understand this: when Christianity was first formed, we're talking about 100 years after the death of Christ. Christianity itself was considered a pagan religion.
Yeah, but that's when the early days when the Roman Empire took it upon. Prior to Christ, the Romans were considered pagans, were they not?
Yeah, the Romans were considered pagans, and then when they started adapting Christianity at that time was considered paganism too. And I believe Paul to be a straight out homosexual. And that dude has some serious problems.
Well, it seems to me that he had some serious issues on so many levels, and I won't even go into that because I think I could really rip this individual apart, and this podcast truly should remain about the topic at hand, about grimoires. And we're now going to jump into the medieval period, and really in the medieval period, the production of grimoires continued in Christendom, and actually, it was the majority of the population among Jewish and Islamic faiths were really, really practicing or continuing with the tradition of grimoires. And
can I just say, too, that when I said Paul had some serious problems, I'm not saying that he had problems just by being a homosexual. Okay, I can't say if that's right or wrong or whatever, but what I'm going to say is he had problems by being a homosexual that did not want married couples to have sex. That was Paul's serious problem.
And that's going against the law of God, is it not? I mean, God created men and women to marry each other and to have sex and to have children and to live fruitful and productive lives. And obviously, he had an issue with following God's law. But anyways, in Christianized Europe, the church really divided books of magic or grimoire books into really two categories. And the first category was books that dealt with natural magic, and the second category was books that dealt with demonic magic. So the church divided into books that they hoped never existed, but there's a little bit of being derogatory, or books that they hoped never would actually materialize into the public. They're dividing them now into two categories, which are natural magic and demonic magic. And the natural magic books were more acceptable because they were viewed by the church as merely taking note of the powers in the natural world that were created by God. So this is how the church made a loophole to allow books that expressed or showed natural magic, because they said that powers in the natural world were actually created by God, so they were okay. And an example of that, Anglo-Saxon leech books, which contain simple spells for medicine purposes, were tolerated. So here you have sort of a second standard where the church is telling you, no, all grimoires are evil. Every magical book is evil. They're holding these events where all these pagan books are just being burnt. Can you imagine the massive bonfire with every magical book? But yet they are allowing books of natural magic. So you really can't have it both ways. Either a grimoire shouldn't be allowed, and then you're making exceptions to the rule. I don't think that's a fair playing field. But then again, when has the Catholic Church ever played on a fair playing field? They make up their own rules to suit their purpose and for their power trip whenever they need it. And there is actually ample historical evidence that medieval clergy were the main practitioners of magic, and therefore they were the owners, they were transcribers, and they were the circulators of many grimoires. And this is a prime example on how the church is completely outlawing grimoires. Oh, they're evil, they should be burnt. But yet they have clergy members that are owners of books. They're transcribing some of these sacred books and they're circulating. So that's a real double standard, and I have a really hard time digesting that fact. Just another example of how the church is mind control of the people.
Not just preachers and clergymen that have these books, but also the Vatican, the Pope. So they can have access to this stuff, but they don't want us to have access to this stuff, and that's their attempt at limiting our ability to access things of a powerful nature or supernatural nature.
Yeah, but if they're trying to say that they're attributing books of natural magic to God, why would they outlaw or ban access to people that are supposed to be worshiping God, these books? I'm sorry, I don't get it. And actually, it is also stated that several grimoires were actually written by popes themselves. So, sorry, I find this very, very hard to choke down and digest. Again, it's a double standard, and I can't stand that. And it was also commonly believed that medieval people, that many other ancient figures in history, such as the poet Virgil, the astronomer Ptolemy, and the philosopher Aristotle, had been involved in magic, and they actually had grimoires that were written by them, and they were circulating around at that particular time. And there was a Franciscan friar by the name of Roger Bacon, who lived from 1214 to 1294, stated that all those books were falsely claiming to be written by these ancient scholars, and they should also be prohibited and banned by law. So again, we have another example of the church, or a representative of the church, twisting and manipulating something to their own twisted end. And then we're going to now go into the Renaissance period, that really saw the very continued interest in magic, and there was also an increased interest in Hermeticism among the many occultists and ceremonial magicians in Europe. And it was actually the movement was actually largely fueled by the 1471 translation of the ancient Corpus Hermeticum into Latin by I'm not even going to pronounce this right. The last name is Ficino in 1433 to 1499. And alongside this particular translation into Latin, there was a rise in the interest in the Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalah. So at that particular time, around the 1400s, when the society was seeing a huge rise in Kabbalah, and actually was spread across the continent by two particular individuals at that time. And the idea of demonology, this is where we see the subject and the idea of demonology remained strong in the Renaissance. And there were actually several demonological grimoires that were published, including the fourth book of occult philosophy and the Pseudo Dominica of, I can't even pronounce that, which actually listed 69 demons in that book. And right again, here we come, the Roman Catholic Church, to counter the publication of these two books. The Roman Catholic Church authorized the production of many works of exorcism. So what does that tell you, folks? Let's put that all into perspective. These particular two books, two particular grimoires on demonology were published, and here we come, the Roman Catholic Church. Why would they have to produce many works on exorcism if they don't believe that demons, or they're teaching the general public demons don't exist? I'm not, that's another way of. I really don't know. The Roman.
No, they're not teaching. I don't know where that information came from, but the Roman Catholic Church never has taught that demons have not existed.
No, but they're trying to just dummy people to say, you shouldn't be reading these books.
Yeah, that's
what are they
they're
really
saying.
trying to say?
That we shouldn't be reading them and things of that nature. Shouldn't be trying to reach out to them or talk to them or communicate with them in any way, shape, or form. But they've always admitted that demons exist. Actually, their writings towards exorcism, started way before Christianity. I mean, you can look at Psalms, and in Psalms, in the Dead Sea Scrolls Bible and in the older Bibles, the Ethiopian Bible even, you have Psalms of exorcism. So the Catholic Church did not originate that. Exorcism was around before Christ started doing it. And so was the prayers for exorcism. So I think 2 years ago, the new Pope here, when in between him dealing with his priests molesting young boys, he took a break from that and came on TV and admitted that, put out a speech that spirits and demons are real. And it's not a matter of proving that they're real, it's a matter of what can we learn from them. And that's coming from the new Pope, so...
Okay, but, when the Roman Catholic Church is putting out books on exorcism, could that not be considered a grimoire? That is a Roman Catholic grimoire. I don't care how anybody cuts or slices it. That's exactly what it is. But it seems that the Roman Catholic Church wants to spoon feed us on what grimoires
Not just
we should
the Roman Catholics do that, but also the Greek Orthodox do that as well.
I'm just saying maybe the Catholic Church in general. That's the proper terminology. I mean, they want to be in control of what grimoires that we should have access to, and really their plan actually came to a stalling point really with the advent of the printing press in Europe, and that really meant that books could be mass produced for the first time, and it could really reach large volumes of the growing literate audience. You have to remember, in medieval times, a lot of people were illiterate, meaning they could not read and write. But as time progressed, more people became literate, and then when the printing press was invented, these books could be mass produced. And among the earliest books to be printed were, of course, magical text grimoires. So that's amazing. And it was able to even though the handwritten grimoires remained highly valued, they were actually said to be contain more magical powers because they were handwritten. And then we come into a very evil time in history, the Inquisition. And really, the Inquisition, in my mind, really organized the mass suppression of people and their beliefs. And in many cases, grimoires were found in the possession of supposed heretics, and their possessions were destroyed. And actually, in 1599, the church published a book called the Indexes of Prohibited Books. So this is the Catholic Church coming out with their own publication, 1599, and many magical grimoires were listed as forbidden, and including several medieval ones. You know what? I've read this on several occasions that the Catholic Church, under their index of forbidden books, listed the Key of Solomon as a forbidden book. You know what? I read that. Each time I read the Key of Solomon being a forbidden book by the Catholic Church, I just about choke. And it was very, very popular at that time, and it's still popular at this time. So the church is saying the Key of Solomon is a forbidden book.
Well, yeah, they said that at the time when Constantine and the priests were together. They removed that from the Bible. So yeah, it was definitely a forbidden book all the way back to the time of Constantine. Prior to Constantine, it was a book that was accepted. So it was a part of the whole conspiracy to brainwash us and force feed us things that were half truths or not even true. So.
And then around the ending of the Inquisition, or maybe even overlapping with the time of the Inquisition, is in Christendom there was also there became a widespread panic or a fear at this particular time in Europe of witchcraft. and the church again falsely believed that witchcraft was satanic in nature, and there we have that word satanic, and mass hysteria, became for the forefront, and that's where we get the terminology the witch hunt, and it really caused the death of around, this is just a rough estimate of over 40,000 people, most of them of course women, but sometimes they found grimoires with these people, and majority of these people that were falsely or that were accused of being witches really had no access to these grimoires or magical books, and very, very scary time when we had the witch hunts. And then in the 18th century we really saw a rise of the period that we call the Enlightenment period, and it was actually a movement in the time that was completely devoted to science and rationalism, and that was another period that the church really had a hard time coping and a hard time controlling its people, and the government really tried to crack down on magicians and fortune tellers, and the police actually viewed them, their own terminology, as social pests. So really, I've really broken down the dynamics on what we call a grimoire. And a grimoire, a magical book, a textbook. Some of us out there, I have my own book. It's called A Book of Shadows, and my Book of Shadows has various spells, different how to create a magical space. It's really a book that I keep accumulating knowledge and different things that I learn in there in regards to, that's my own little personal grimoire, is A Book of Shadows. And if you'll remember, there's a lot of movies that make reference to grimoires. Dr. John Dee is said to have various legendary grimoires. At that particular time in England, he had the largest library of books. Was stolen from him. So he, a lot of grimoires are associated with him as well. And I'm going to sort of leave a little bit of food for thought for you. And there's 9 most eerie books and grimoires of all times. So some of these you may not even think of as a magical book or as a grimoire. And number 1 is called the Voynich manuscript, and this was from 1404 to 1438. That's number 1, and it really had a strange, archaic, unknown alphabet, and it was actually made on calf skin, and it had all these bizarre plants and bizarre pictures. So that's the Voynich manuscript. Number 2 is the Munich Manual of Demonic Magic, and it's really a necromancer's manual, and it was attributed to a 15th century German magician. Number 3 is a Codex Seraphinicus, or it was actually, to be surprising, it was written in the 1970s, and very archaic again, and it actually had trucks with human heads on it. Then it had human body parts with mechanical parts, so a weird codex, kind of nobody really understood it. Number 4 is a Heptameron, or 7 days, and it's actually about a person that died in prison during the Inquisition, and it had a lot of planetary magic, and it's also called 7 days. So number 5 is actually, this is the one you could call a diary of a madman. Number 5 is actually the writings of the insane. And G. Mackenzie Bacon was actually a medical superintendent at an asylum, an insane asylum in England. So he kind of compiled all these writings of all these people that were housed in this, it's a full-born asylum in England. So that was a very odd book of people that were insane. Again, Diary of a Madman. Number 6 is the Picatrix, or the Aim of the Sage, and it is said to be written by the 11th century Arabic magic. So that's the 11th century. Number 7 is the Ora Linda book. And it's actually, this one is quite interesting, called, it's also nicknamed Himmler's Bible. And Himmler, as we know, Hitler worked with Adolf Hitler, and it's said to contain wisdom that's over 4,000 years old. Number 8 is the story of the Vivian Girls, and it was composed in 1973 by a American author Henry Darger, and actually has a lot of pictures in there, has a scenic pictures, and it also has very graphic pictures of children being tortured. So that's a very horrific book, number 8. Number 9 is actually the Grand Grimoire, or they also call it the Red Dragon, and it was said to also, the other name is the Gospel of Satan, and it's said to be written in 1520 and discovered, and it's actually written, it was based on some of King Solomon's magic, and it was written at one point in Hebrew and Aramaic. And very, very interested in those particular 9 books or odd books or supposed grimoires. And there's another book that was actually written in 1782, Petit Albert, and it actually gives instructions for making a hand of glory. And I don't know if anybody out there did you know what the hand of glory is?
No.
It's actually supposed to be the hand taken from a person that has been hung, and you keep it. It's the mummified hand that is supposed to be magically powerful from the person of a hangman.
I'd like to say too that in 1969 there was this guy named Anton LaVey, and he wrote the Satanic Bible. Now, that Bible as a whole, I don't recommend reading, but that book actually contains magical elements in it too.
And I'm sure Aleister Crowley has said to have been written a lot of text in regards to air magic and all that. Maybe you could touch on. Timothy has written a book about Aleister Crowley. He does touch on some of the texts and air magic and a lot of the ceremonies and rituals that Aleister Crowley did as well.
Yeah, I did. But I recommend, if people want to learn about Aleister Crowley, go to Amazon.com and buy the book Aleister Crowley by me, Timothy Mark. So
I got another interesting one
ahead.
too, because as a historian, I'm fascinated with periods in time. And following the French Revolution of 1789, a hugely influential grimoire was published, and that again is the Grand Grimoire, and it is said to have a spell for conjuring or making a pact with the devil's chief minister.
But let me ask you this: in your 9 there, did you have the Codex Gigas?
Codex, I didn't have that one. Nope.
Okay, so if you really want to dive into something, this would be the ultimate grimoire. Will be the Codex Gigas, or Gigas, however you pronounce it, Gigas, Codex Gigas, and that was written by a monk in the 13th century, and everybody who's owned it is either died or had a tragedy associated with it. And so but that is definitely considered the devil's Bible, and it's called the Codex Gigas. But it's been labeled the devil's Bible, but who really knows? That could just be a term to try to steer us away from reading the Bible, because most people won't want to read a book called the Devil's Bible. But it was created in the early 13th century in the Benedictine monastery in Bohemia. Now let's understand this. Saint Benedict, all the exorcisms that the Catholic Church use, and all the exorcism rituals that we use, not all of them, but some of them, are attributed to Saint Benedict. It's his creation on how to do this. It's his instructions on how to do it. Saint Benedict. So the fact that his monastery had a monk that created this book, I think this book could be extremely powerful, and I think people used it for the wrong reasons, and they found death or death or harm or whatever.
Right, and you know what? We have had a fascination with magical books since the beginning of time, and you know what? It's been brought into mainstream culture and accepted now. Again, we can think of Harry Potter. Every single Harry Potter movie out there, of course, they have their magic wands, but they also have magical books of grimoires. We also have one of my other one of my favorites of all time movies is Hocus Pocus again, and they have a magical book with an eye on the outside. I mean, every witch or every practitioner has their own grimoire, whether you call it a book of shadows. I have my book of shadows, but we all have, and I mean, let's really strip this down again. A grimoire really is a how-to-do instructional book on how to create magical objects.
And you've given me a grimoire too. 2 years ago? I forget the name of it now.
It has Timothy's grimoire has to do with King Solomon's seagulls and how to actually invoke and call upon angels and demons. Like I said, you can invoke angels, spirits, and demons.
And that's what the Codex Gigas, and I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, it's Gigas. Look that one up, and don't let the title that's been given to it, the Devil's Bible, steer you away from it, because I think there's a lot to learn from that book.
There's a lot to learn, and we on every single podcast we always stress the power is in the Word. Well, this is the power in the written Word that has been around for thousands of years. And King Solomon, to me, was he was after Hermes or Thoth, was one of the greatest magicians that ever lived as well, because we are still learning and we are still using a lot of the magical symbols today.
Yeah, but are we using it correctly? A lot of people don't use them correctly because a lot of people don't have the proper training and things of that nature.
Yeah, but
that's why they find harm or death come to them.
Yeah, but for hundreds and hundreds of years, the Catholic Church has ridiculed, persecuted, burnt at the stake people that are just seeking knowledge. And who are they to tell us as the public what we can and cannot do? I'm sorry.
Yeah, and while the Catholic Church has become extremely wealthy, I definitely would not let them dumb me down or label something a devil's Bible when it was created in the St. Benedictine monastery, and you're going to call it the devil's Bible to try to keep me from reading it. I am a Judeo-Christian, and I do not promote satanic activity. I do not promote anything satanic or anything evil, but I would say that I don't view that book as being evil. I view it being magical on many levels, and I think that in the right hands, a lot of power could come from it.
Yeah, but this is just my train of thought too. Did God not want the Bible to be created so he could enlighten his people on the right path to take and the right life to live? To me, the Bible still should be considered a grimoire. I don't care what anybody says. That's my opinion, that the Bible is a grimoire. And you talk about the Egyptian Book of the Dead is a grimoire as well.
Let me put it to you in the easiest terms. Okay, God said, seek me and you'll find me. Over and over again, God says, seek me and you'll find me. There's a difference. Let me put it in the terms of fishing. If you go out to a big lake and you go fishing, you're seeking fish, right? And you'll find fish if you seek it. But if you go to a pond, this a breeding pond, and it's a very small pond, and you cast your bait in there, you're going to pull out what they wanted you to pull out, what they put in there for you. You're going to pull out the exact fish that they wanted you to pull out. So by just reading the King James Version Bible, you're only reading what they want you to read. By expanding your thought process and opening your mind and looking at the Ethiopian Bible, looking at older books that's older than the King James Version Bible, you're actually seeking God. You're fishing in the big lake instead of the small pond that has the fish that they put in there that they want you to catch.
And again, I mentioned Moses and I mentioned the book of Enoch, And I mean, Moses, he practiced magic well. I mean, whether it was God's magic or not, he was still a magician. And of course, Enoch as well. So really, I mean, grimoires are not evil. Grimoires are not evil. It is just through hundreds and hundreds of years that the Catholic Church have told us they are evil, because they do not like people that seek knowledge or they seek to better themselves, because you're losing control over the people.
Again, I don't want to confuse this. Moses might have practiced magic when he was living in Egypt. The power that he used to do the Exodus and to create the plagues was the power of God.
Right.
That is not magic. That is the power of God.
Right, but he did practice magic while he was in Egypt.
Yes.
That's a known fact. But, I like everything that we bring to you in our podcasts, do your research. Just because the church is telling you that this is evil, I can't read this, please open your mind, seek answers. As you can tell from this presentation on grimoires, the Catholic Church since the very beginning has been telling us that these magical books are evil. They are not evil, folks. Please don't fall into that trap and not purchase a book or seek knowledge. It's how it all comes down to how you use the knowledge. Are you going to use this knowledge for good? Or are you going to use this knowledge for evil? It's all up to you. The knowledge itself is not evil. It's how you use it.
Yes. And you know what? I'm a veteran, but when I was in active duty in the military, I'll give you an example. It was a violation of the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, to have sex in any other position other than a missionary position. That, believe it or not, that was in the rules still to the day that I was in the military. So you have these stupid ass rules and these stupid ass beliefs that we were told that if we were caught having sex in any way other than missionary, then that would be a violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It's true. It was, and I don't know if that rule has changed.
And
but
who
I got
came
out
up
in
with
2008. But all the way up to 2008, it was in the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It's the government that came up with it. That they thought that it was came up with a long time ago, but they perceived it any other way other than that was being like evil, wrong.
Wow, that I can't even.
Yeah.
I can't say anything. I've heard that, but I don't know who thinks of these archaic rules. Maybe it's somebody that lives a very twisted and sordid life that really has to just spread their misery. I feel sad for those people. But that's just how archaic and barbaric rules and regulations. I mean, they have no basis on truth, but they're just put out there.
Yes.
And that's what, what I'm trying to get across in regards to grimoires is the books and the knowledge aren't evil. It's just how you use the knowledge. And, it's just what highway you want to travel on. And it's totally up to you.
You got anything else on grimoires? Or
That's about, that covers it in a nutshell. And do more exploration on grimoires. Most of you out there have your own kind of little books. Like I said, I have a book of shadows. We have our own little magical books. You can have a magical diary. You can keep any kind of meditation, any kind of divination things in a little diary. It does not have to be fancy. All it has to be is yours.
There you go. So again, we'll be at the Revolution Cafe this coming Friday,
March 9th.
At
between 6 and 11, and the address is 211B South Main Street, Bryan, Texas. Please don't miss out. We're going to be there for a very limited time, and we have rune readings. We'll have, if we have any red brick dust left, we'll have books. You'll be able to chat with us up close and personal. Don't miss it. It's going to be awesome, folks.
Yes. So I guess that's it for now, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.